C'est parti. Bonjour à tous, je vous laisse vous asseoir, trouver une place. Super. Bonjour à tous, nous sommes donc l'équipe Tech2Med est réellement ravie de vous retrouver pour une seconde édition de DTx France. Merci beaucoup à tous nos participants d'avoir répondu à notre appel. Merci à tous les sponsors et les participants d'être là encore une fois. Comme vous le savez, l'actualité des DTx a été particulièrement riche cette année. C'est pour ça qu'on se réunit aujourd'hui. Et cette actualité était tellement riche que je propose, on ne va pas perdre trop de temps, je vais passer tout de suite la parole à Franck Lemeur, qui va commencer à faire un petit tour d'horizon de tout ce qui s'est passé entre juillet 2022 et juillet 2023 dans le domaine des DTx en France et plus largement du numérique en santé. Je vous souhaite une très bonne journée et on se retrouvera très certainement au cours de la journée. À plus tard.
Merci Mathilde. Merci. Vous m'entendez bien? Super. Donc effectivement, une deuxième édition, bienvenue aujourd'hui. Vous êtes nombreux, je sens pas mal de gens qui vont encore arriver. Ravi de vous accueillir pour cette édition qui est hybride. Vous allez voir que vous êtes 190 inscrits aujourd'hui en présentiel, y compris les conférenciers, et on a presque une centaine de personnes à distance, dont pas mal de médecins qui, j'espère, nous entendent, qui sont inscrits dans le cadre d'un partenariat avec Vidal, que je remercie au passage d'avoir pu mettre à disposition leur plateforme pour inviter ces médecins. C'est important qu'on ait des professionnels de santé aujourd'hui aussi qui découvrent et qui arrivent à appréhender un peu plus ce potentiel des thérapies numériques. Je veux d'abord remercier nos partenaires, nos sponsors qui nous ont rejoints cette année. Il y en a des anciens, il y en a des nouveaux. Et aujourd'hui, sans ces sponsors et partenaires, que ce soit sponsors et partenaires institutionnels, on ne pourrait pas réaliser cette journée. Donc encore merci à toutes ces personnes et toutes ces institutions qui nous ont rejoints aujourd'hui pour réaliser cette édition. Alors une deuxième édition, c'est toujours une des plus compliquées. On pense déjà à la troisième, on se dit mais on va faire la deuxième. Toujours compliqué à organiser parce qu'on s'est dit qu'est-ce qu'on raconte, qu'est-ce qu'on fait cette année avec cette thématique des TTx. Premièrement, on a toujours autant de demandes, autant de questionnements sur cette dynamique des thérapies numériques dans le monde et en France également. Et donc l'intérêt étant là, on s'est dit allons créer cette deuxième édition. Alors, comme disait Mathilde, il s'est passé pas mal de choses. Alors, l'année dernière, pour ceux qui étaient là, on se rappelle qu'on attendait des annonces en juillet 2022. On devait attendre ce fameux décret, on va dire, de parcours d'accès au marché accéléré, avancé pour les thérapies numériques. Il n'est pas venu tout de suite, comme celui pour la télésurveillance médicale. Ils sont arrivés entre-temps. Et aujourd'hui, j'ai envie de dire, on a quand même une avancée significative dans les chemins d'accès au marché que ce soit la télésurveillance et d'une prise en charge anticipée pour les dispositifs médico-numériques. Et donc c'est une actualité qui s'est fortement accélérée et dont d'ailleurs les acteurs, que ce soit la DNS, la HAS, viendront discuter aujourd'hui. On verra pendant cette journée comment aussi se comportent les DTx en France. Il y a pas mal de bonne volonté, j'ai envie de dire, d'entrepreneurs. Il y a des innovations, il y a des gens qui s'investissent, des investisseurs aussi. On a un écosystème numérique avec leurs représentants qui sont là. On a des avancées, mais pour autant, il y a énormément de questions qui subsistent. On a des questions, des questionnements, des doutes, des incertitudes sur la compréhension, sur la réalisation, les usages, les adoptions. Donc toutes ces questions aujourd'hui sont sur la table. Et bien évidemment, on a bien envie que nous les traitions sans langue de bois aucune, que les choses soient dites, que l'idée c'est que cette conférence est une conférence pour avancer. Et l'idée, c'est qu'aussi, à travers vos discussions, vos échanges, vous puissiez vous entendre, vous comprendre, et aussi faire que les choses soient dans l'essor de ces nouvelles thérapies. On verra au décours des tables rondes, d'ailleurs, que beaucoup de tables rondes sont orientées vers la pratique, vers la vraie vie, accès au marché, adoption, usage, remboursement, distribution, supply chain des DTx, toutes ces questions qui sont aujourd'hui pas encore complètement comprises, et donc on aura l'occasion de les discuter. On aura deux tables rondes assez différentes. Rappelez-vous, l'année dernière, on avait eu des keynotes. Là, cette année, on a voulu faire une table ronde sur deux tables rondes un peu inspirationnelles. Une première qui sera animée par le grand Jérôme Leleu, qui fait l'honneur d'être ici, et qui a l'habitude d'animer les tables rondes en numérique santé. Et Jérôme animera une table ronde sur est-ce que le numérique peut sauver notre système de santé. On a beaucoup de défis avec notre système. Est-ce que le numérique est une équation, une solution à nos difficultés? Et on aura une table ronde un peu plus sur le futur des thérapies ou des solutions numériques. On parlera de biocapteurs digitaux, on parlera de médecine personnalisée. Donc bien évidemment, ce sera une table ronde aussi qui sera animée cet après-midi par Stéphane Tollander de France Biotech. Donc voilà, avec l'équipe Tech2Med, on est vraiment ravis de vous accueillir pour cette deuxième édition. On est à votre disposition pour que cette expérience de cette journée se passe le mieux possible. J'espère que vous passerez un bon moment, que vous y trouviez vos intérêts, vos réponses. Et encore une fois, merci pour votre soutien et votre présence aujourd'hui. Et je pense qu'on peut commencer la journée avec la première table ronde in English, please, with Megan Coder. Megan, thank you again to come this year again from the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. And I propose to invite all your panelists to come with you on the scene. Thank you.
Welcome to the International Panel in English. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really glad to meet each of you. What we're going to talk about today, we have different segments of this. We're going to go through and do a round of, let's do introductions first, and then we can go into some more of the content. So my name is Megan Coder. I'm from the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. I've been excited to be a part of this ecosystem for quite a bit and look forward to sharing much more today. Geraldine, I'll pass it to you.
Hey, sorry. My name is Geraldine O'Neill. I'm the head of consulting services and analytics at IQVIA. I'm very glad to be there.
Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm co-founder and CPO at Hello Better. We are German DTx, mostly for mental health.
So hello, I'm Vincent. I'm working at the DNS at the French Ministry of Health, and I'm in charge of the patent process.
Hello everyone, I'm Ludovic. I'm co-founder of Neuroventis.
All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to run through a couple of background slides on what we've been working on. Geraldine will then take over and talk about more of the global perspective. And then each of our colleagues here will talk a little bit about each of their perspectives from within the countries they're operating in primarily, and then we'll dive into the discussion. So with that, happy 4th of July to those fellow Americans who are clearly not in the audience today. What I wanted to talk about is this idea around standardization. We as an industry have come quite a far way. Creating a new category of medicine is not for the faint of heart. How do you go about actually engaging and getting it into the hands of patients globally? That's something we've been working at. And one of my perspectives has been this idea around standardization. So one example, I've spent a lot of times on planes recently, and my son is here, but how would the industry of airlines survive without harmonization across the world? And I think the same idea applies to the categories of medicine. Without having harmonized standards globally, it's not really possible for us to be able to do what we're trying to do and at any degree of scale. So within DTA, I spent a lot of time working on this toolkit. It's on our website, so you can access this at any point. But we've put together a list of documents and publications and resources for decision makers, whether they are policymakers in hospitals, clinicians, or otherwise. How do they approach this industry? And this is the start of it. One of the first things was talking about a more formalized perspective of the digital health technology ecosystem. I even saw there's a one-page handout in the program today for this with a QR code, so you're welcome to download and we can go from there. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, they published their definition of what a digital therapeutic is earlier, actually I should say last month now. So in June, they published this new definition, and we as DTA will be adopting this definition of what is a digital therapeutic. What I love about this is that this has international applicability and it's a standards perspective. So this was the first step, is the definition. The next step will be the actual development of the formal technical specification for digital therapeutics. With that, then I'm going to run through a few quick things that were in this toolkit. We wanted to talk not only about what is that global ecosystem of digital health technologies, what is a digital therapeutic, but then how do you just start to describe what digital therapeutics are in comparison to each other? We know that not all digital therapeutics are the same. So we talked a little bit about intended uses. We spoke a bit about some potential mechanisms of action. This list is not all-inclusive. We know it will evolve, but we really want to help people understand what is a digital therapeutic and how does it relate to patient care in a variety of different ways. From there, we talked about market access pathways, and I think this will be a discussion point for us today. Not all digital therapeutics should go to patients in the same route. There will be a variety of mechanisms they can take. Different payers will be involved, different decision makers will be involved. So all of that to say, it's important to note that no single one pathway is the only pathway, that we will continue to see a lot of variety. We also, I put this in here to help describe some of this notion around prescription versus non-prescription pathways. Prescription is a very good pathway in many regards, but again, it's not the only pathway. This idea of having a gated and non-gated perspective, I really want to make clear that non-prescription doesn't just mean over-the-counter, that, oh, there are prescriptions, oh, okay. Désolé. It's the only word I can say consistently in French. So that was that. Then we also broke down this idea of value assessment. So if you are a payer, how do you go about starting to break down how to approach these? So we had a really long document that was put out in May of last year. We broke it down into 6 more usable documents with a lot more poignancy in it, helping individuals understand much more clearly what are the questions, how do you evaluate this? And then this is one of the things I would like to eventually dive into a bit more here, is really the evidentiary pathway. We know that digital therapeutics require different levels of evidence and different types of evidence, but what is good and what is sufficient is a question that we are still trying to figure out today. I think a lot of the studies that digital therapeutics have done may very well be, quote, good and sufficient, but when looked at compared to different technologies or therapeutic areas, decision makers may not know how to assess those studies, so what is good and sufficient may not be perceived the same way. So we really need to come together as a full ecosystem with policymakers, with payers, with manufacturers to understand what is this level that we are going to be able to say, this is what we should all achieve for. And therefore manufacturers know what to achieve for, and then decision makers know what to say, okay, now we have something to work with, and let's move forward to the next step. And then one of the last things I wanted to bring up is this initial idea around this multifunctional approach. It's something that I've been putting more thought into, but this is just one example of 6 products that just were made up. But I really do believe that digital therapeutics are being integrated with other technologies. I think an idea of just a pure standalone product is very well and possible and can work in many ways. But there's a good chance it will be working alongside of or with other components that may be analytic, it may be communications, it may have other even diagnostic or monitoring elements. So how do we discuss that, and how do we start to break down, if you have a therapeutic element, these are the requirements you need to meet. If you have a diagnostic element, these are the requirements. And if we can start to have more global harmonization, then I think we can finally start to hit more scale between countries and across jurisdictions. So I would love to dig into this a bit more as we go. And lastly, I think this idea around mapping what is currently taking place is really important. So I look forward to turn to Geraldine now, who will be able to talk a lot more around what are the trends that we've been seeing, what are some of the things that have been happening. We within DTA worked with Healthware to put this report together. It's hosted on Healthware site. It's all you have to do is put your name and email address in, but it's a free report, has a lot of information in it, and I welcome everyone to look at it. It's what we currently know now, but as I've already learned in the last day, it's going to be outdated in the next 6 weeks. So having more insight, starting with it, I think is a good step, but we need to keep evolving it, knowing that different pathways will continually evolve. So that's my opening intro. Geraldine, I'll pass it to you, and then we'll go from there.
I agree.
The big green.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to start with a very quick reminder or intro. Do you know Michael Pace? He's a digital opinion leader.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Megan, for answering the question. He made this interesting analysis after looking at 8 different sources. What he found out is that the average CAGR for DTx by 2030 should meet 25% and around $31 billion. Just to give you an introduction. But in the meantime, we all know that this market is currently in an ambivalent situation. On the one hand, we have the recent fall of therapeutics and the difficulties for some sustainable development solutions to raise money after years of hegemony. And on the other hand, and that's what Megan explained, there are more and more established access routes, and especially in Europe, and new DTx each month. If we look at the figure, we also see that this market is really evolving so fast. It's really hard to keep up. We have an IQVIA Digital Health Trends with updated data, but of course it will be released in September, so this is not updated, but we can have some trends. What we see is that starting 22, we had already 137 DTx, mainly focused on neurologic and psychiatric conditions. And we will see afterwards that it is always, this is still the same right now. If we deep dive in Europe, we see that today we have, well, in June, it may have changed since, we have around 110 DTx digital care apps candidate for reimbursement, and several are also focused in mental health. Without deep diving in each figure, what we can see today is that in Germany, the current trends are pretty positive in terms of prescriber behavior, overall adoption, but we also see that the growth has been slower than anticipated. We are now entering a new stage of DIGA. We see that there is new opportunities, but also a lot of challenges, such as the resistance, especially on data privacy, the better use of real-world evidence, and I think it's the same also in France, and potential changes in pricing as they are studying the fact that they can have pricing cap, for instance. In the UK, we have today like 12 recommended apps, mainly focused on mental health. In France, in addition to the 2 approved EMN, we also note that Pékin is on the right, and Vincent, we talked about that, is starting to ramp up. We have 17 files submitted to Pékin right now, maybe more? No? Okay.
I'm not sure where you find this number, but
I think it's Hospi Media.
we have a lot of intention to submission, but probably not
17.
this number.
This
But we still, the text was published like 3 months ago, and we already have submitted the application, so that will be evaluated.
Maybe
soon,
not 17. But they are still waiting.
A lot of intention to submit.
They are still waiting to find out what will be the pricing. And in Belgium, we see we have 38 apps and only one, that has reached level 3 and is seeking for reimbursement. Here, what we also see is that this raises the question of sustainability of the business model, and I think Megan will be asking questions around that afterwards, but I just wanted to anticipate it and give you some insights from a panel that have been moderated by IQVIA last week in the UK. There were many topics discussed, but 2 were really make an extensive debate. The first one is the fact that DTx developers see global evidence generation as very challenging due to fragmentation. For instance, even with Pékin in France, they cannot just copy-paste from Germany, they have to adapt. And ultimately, the existence of new pathway doesn't guarantee an easy access. It might be better to pursue with more similar markets, even if smaller, or if they have to redo a clinical study, do it for the US market, which is basically more attractive. The second point is the fact that there's a consensus around the idea that reimbursement is not enough and that commercial success clearly is not a given. There are very different views on what would be the best way to enhance sustainability, and probably it's not the same in each country. There are discussions on OTC, DTx, and also a strong interest for closed-loop medicine, and to see how it can enhance the business model. Well, and just to conclude and let my partners discuss around this topic, things are moving fast, and it's up to everyone here involved to work together and to make it a lasting success. And I think that's exactly what Vincent, Pierre-Alexis and Ludovic are working on right now.
So thank you for that. Lovely. Oh, no, we're not doing that.
We are not at the
We'll just go all the way back. Oh, I have so many slides. All right, in the meantime, while I'm doing this, if we could start moving over. Right now, today, we're talking much more around Europe and we're almost there. Voila. Okay. Today's a lot going on with Europe. We can also speak about some other jurisdiction too at some point in Q&A even, whether it's South Korea, Japan, Australia, or others, but I really want to focus. And one of the questions we had first off was just giving us an overview from your perspectives, first of all, what you're working on probably, and then what your perspective is within the country. And Pierre-Alexis, I know you are familiar with many systems, but I'm assuming that Germany would be an area you could speak to. We'll start there and then move on to Vincent with France and then Ludwig with Belgium.
Sure, thanks a lot. So a quick word about the DIGA system. So DIGA started 3 years ago in June 2020. So a quick reminder how it works. It's similar to Pécan. You have 2 tracks, preliminary tracks, which allows companies to bring their product to market while conducting their study, and the other track that that allows you to bring the product directly by bringing your existing evidence to the Ministry of Health. So these are the 2 tracks. Today we see, as was mentioned, we have 53 companies listed in the directory. A third of them being permanent and 2/3 still being preliminary, and we have a 35% success rate from application to listing. So about 150 applications in total, and only 53 that made it to the directory. From the manufacturer perspective, from the GP perspective, or the patient perspective, the process is still a little clumsy. Essentially, patients need to get their prescription from a GP or psychotherapist, and then to send it to the health insurance. As you know, Germany is a decentralized system. So send it to the health insurance, which then sends an activation code back to the patient. Sometimes it's digital, but most often it's actually by post. And then you use that code to essentially enter the DIGA or the product. That creates problems, of course. We see quite a strong churn from prescription to activation, about 40%. There is no quick solution to that. The one solution will be e-prescription that is starting to ramp up in Germany. And for DIGA, it will only be in the 3rd cycle of ramp up, so probably only in 2025. Until then, it is definitely a problem of sustainability to spend so much money on acquiring leads that don't actually convert in the end. Another few data points in terms of traction. So year 1 to year 2, we had 50,000 prescriptions in year 1. Last year we had 150,000, so 3 times growth. The number for year 3 will come out any month now, I think in July or August, and we expect similar level of growth. And in terms of product growth, it's similar to what we see for pharma sales. Typical pharma products would grow 180% from year 1 to year 2. And what we see in Germany is that a typical DIGA grows 150% from year 1 to year 2, which is not too bad considering, of course, that we start from scratch. We have no sales team, or at least you have to build your sales teams, and of course, only a fraction of the resources that a pharma company have. And in last data point, maybe on the patient side, what we see is a typical patient of 70% female and average age 45. Of course, the age conditions, the age varies vastly according to the condition that you have, but that's what we see so far.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I also did not realize that 2025 is when the new implementation of e-prescribing will come about. For DIGA. Yeah, but that's really interesting just to know what horizon we're looking at as an industry. Vincent, I'll turn to you.
Thanks. So in France, we have one of the most advanced systems in terms of pathway for market access for medical devices. That could be pathway, derogatory pathway or standard pathway. And I just want to deep dive on the PECAN pathway because we released it this year, and it's one that is dedicated to digital devices. And two types of devices are eligible. One are the, let's say, RPM for remote patient monitoring or telemonitoring activities. And I won't talk about this, and I just want to focus on the second typology of devices, which are the DTx. So the devices that are used by the patient, let's say, outside the interaction or the monitoring by a healthcare professional. So the PECAN is a one-year reimbursable, one-year reimbursement that is granted to the company during this year. The company can do several things. They can use this time to finish their clinical study that is already running and they are, let's say, about to finish. They can finish the demonstration around their proofs and the elements showing their medical benefits or any organizational benefits that they want to provide to the health tech assessment agency. And they can also start their operational deployment nationwide with a first price, first reimbursement, which will be announced soon, probably less than a month, and will be a fixed fee to also to give a visibility and avoid negotiation before that will avoid and take longer for the product to start be available for the patients. And in terms of eligibility for the PECAN, you should be you should apply for a medical device. There is no risk class, so it could be class 1 to class 3 in terms of risk class. The DMD, so the digital should be at, let's say, the main function for the medical device. So it's really designed for medical devices where the digital has a strong part, and you also need to explain how your DTx is innovative, and also to show the different running clinical studies that will give you the opportunity to, by the end of the PECAN, to fully prove the medical benefit of your solution. So it's not the 1 year of the PECAN is not the time to start clinical study and start collecting real-world data. It's really the time to finish your collection or finish the analysis and submit it, and also take the time for the evaluation on the medical device, on the, let's say, medical part, and also the negotiation time for the price to go on. But yet the technology and the DTx is available to the patients, and you can start prescribing, because it's only a prescription.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll carry on to Belgium next, and then we'll have questions as we go.
Thank you. So Belgium. Belgium was actually one of the first countries that had a reimbursement system for DTx. So the mHealth pyramid is around 5 years old. Unfortunately, in Belgium, we're not very good in executing because in Germany, they were a bit later and they have more DGAs reimbursed than in Belgium. So a little word about the pyramid. So the pyramid has 3 levels. Level 1 is you can enter if you're a medical device and if you're GDPR certified. Level 2 is that you're connected with the digital ecosystem. So that means that interoperability and other elements to connect to the Belgium system. And then level 3 has 2 sub-levels. So we have 3-, which has temporary reimbursement, and then 3+ is final reimbursement. So on 3-, there's actually 1 app, and in total of the pyramid we have around, like we heard, around 40 apps. So that's the Belgian part. Now the news is that actually this pyramid will be replaced. So as of September, October, there will be a new reimbursement process in Belgium. The final process is not published yet, but I can maybe share a bit the pros and the cons, what will come out. The positive part is that the new process will be owned by the insurer himself. So will be by the INAMI, so that's the SIS or BFARM of Belgium. So they will own the process. So that means I hope that once they're behind it, that they will really execute it very well. Some downsides are that it's again a new process, and in the draft process that we saw now, the timelines are very long. So you have to pass a couple of committees. It's always more than 100 days in between committees, so you're gone for a little while. And the second downside is that it's not a new law. And so whereas in Germany and in France, it's really a law or a decree, whereas in Belgium it's more a new procedure. So it's a bit less strict. So they need less execution on it. But overall, in Belgium we're happy that they don't stop the pyramid, and so that there is a new reimbursement process. But we still have to wait for all the details to see if it will be better or worse.
And that was surprising for me to hear that. The United Kingdom, England, has been one of those leaders also early on. They were the first ones to say, here's what level of evidence you need in order to demonstrate clinical and economic outcomes. And they've now been modifying their pathways and processes quite a bit. So now to hear about Belgium modifying is a big deal, at least from my perspective. So let's dive into one of the questions. So starting at a higher level, biggest challenges and pain points. I think we've identified a few of them, but I would love just to hear, are there common challenges either across jurisdictions that companies you are facing? And maybe Ludwig and Pierre, you want to start with that? But I would just be curious from that perspective. And then we can go more into some of the challenges you're facing individually too, from your perspective.
Yeah, happy to start. There are definitely a few challenges that we see. I think that, like it was mentioned earlier, pricing is one. Or I would say pricing versus volume versus level of regulation that is required from DTx companies. We are talking about startups with limited access to capital that certainly have to I would say provide a level of regulated care that is sometimes not even required from like larger pharma groups. So that becomes a problem. I think it's a good thing overall. Actually, having more transparency, more security is definitely a good thing. But that has to come with, I would say, a price that allows companies to have a sustainable business. The price today in Germany, on average, when companies list their product preliminary, they can list any price they want. On average, it's a 500 euro price, which is quite steep, of course, and that so far has been decreased by 60% when it becomes permanent. So right now, the average price of a DIGA is about 210%, and there is a lot of cost associated in the background to that. And it seems that also the BFARM is always finding new creative ways of adding new regulations or new things that you need to add in your product or new pathways for your patients to have. And I think that 200 euros, why not? It can work, but then we have to work on the volume. And right now, that's not happening. As we saw, for instance, with the churn of 40% from prescription to activation, that cannot work. So let's work on the volume. Let's find easier way to prescribe or easier access to care, and then I think it can fly. Yeah.
I think we're aligned on the biggest challenge. I think in terms of costs, you need pharma budgets. You need pharma budgets for your R&D, your development, and you need pharma budgets for your commercial teams. And the prices are not always pharma prices. And so there's definitely a mismatch. So that's definitely the biggest challenge. And actually, when we see in the UK, the price of DTx are even lower than in Germany, right? So Germany is even good there. So that's definitely challenge number one. And that also reflects in investors. So we see there that typically digital health companies, we are funded by digital health investors, which have another reasoning than, let's say, more life tech investors. And so there I really also hope that there is a trend towards our digital health investors, that you need more pharma budgets, and that your return will be also more pharma-like than other digital companies. So I can only echo that the business model part is the biggest challenge at this moment for us.
Yeah, for sure. Let's say a fair price is a very a big challenge, and also maybe the associated price model, because it's digital devices, you can track or pay only the devices that are used, or only the devices that allows the patient to reach certain KPIs or individual KPIs or national KPIs, that it's more difficult to apply for the, let's say, traditional pharmaceutical. And another challenge is also what you said, you need a lot of capital. So that's why in France, with the digital health acceleration strategy, we are investing 750 million euros for the funding and subvention for the demonstration, clinical demonstration, training of the healthcare professional, and also large clinical studies that will be able to show the digital or the health benefits of the digital technologies.
Yeah, and I think that budget to train healthcare professionals, I think it's something amazing here in France. Maybe to come back on your comment to say that indeed, why not only reimburse DTx that are really used, right? Because you can track that. There you can see it from two perspectives. From a first perspective, you could say it's fair, because if it's not used, patient is not helped, so you shouldn't pay for it. At the other hand, if you look at it, if you compare to pharmaceutical companies, if you buy their pills, pharmaceutical companies get their money, even if patients don't take their pills. So from that perspective, you could say it's unfair, right? Because if you again take the parallel, we don't know if they take their pills or not, and we all know that adherence of pills is very low.
Yeah, I think it's 50% or so, no? So it's pretty low. But yeah, I mean, transparency goes again in the right direction. Performance-based pricing, I think, is the future. There is no way around it. I mean, it's natural that it will be that way. There is the Digital Act, so a new law in Germany will be passed by the end of the year that will introduce a variable part on the pricing. About 20% of the pricing will be variable, performance-based. Now the question remains to be seen, do they take the 200 euros as the maximum, or do they go down from there? And that is a game changer. And we, of course, will make our case that it needs to be a range that goes, of course, then beyond 200 in the event of the DIGA being used to its full extent.
Just wanted to add something around the fact that, yes, there's a strong need for capitals, but I really agree with what you explained as well, is that there's also a strong need to be faster, because in fact, the slower you are, you will need more capitals. So there's really this need to go faster on the market, to test, to assess, to see how goes the adoption, and so on. So I think Pékin, it's a very good
This is how the process was designed. It's both early market access or early reimbursement, and also a fast track, because during the evaluation we prioritize parallelize some part of the evaluation process, and we also reduce the time for the evaluation to really get the approval faster than the standard pathway for market access.
Yeah, we also don't have to forget that our DTx will be less long on the market than a normal drug, right? I don't know, Pierre, what you have in mind with Hello Better, what's the lifetime of your DTx, but it's definitely less than a drug, right? So that's another point to take into account.
Yeah, totally true. And also with the improvements in AI, it's very clear that the next generation will be AI driven. Well, let's see what regulations allow us to do there. But yeah, I don't expect a few more years, like 3-5 years. I think that you'll have new generations of products on the market, which therefore will imply new clinical studies. And I think also another thing we see is that clinical studies are becoming more and more expensive. Because of course running a clinical study for a product that's already on the market with competitors is 3-4 times more expensive than a new product.
So yes, we have 3 challenges, I think, in what you say. First one is the evaluation, the clinical evaluation, organizational quality of life, or economic evaluation. And the second one is the re-evaluation or continuous evaluation of digital devices that could be updated several times or in a faster than drugs. And the third one maybe is the challenge of, let's say, international harmonization for the HTA, for the health tech evaluation, because so that's something we are working on with our partners, with Belgium, with Germany, with European countries, because they are not far from here and have the same challenges. But yeah, the recognition or mutual evaluation or whatever will be the future is something that will be a huge challenge, but will be necessary for the large deployment of DTx.
So if I can jump in with a question. I love the discussion. Let's keep it going. One of the things I'm curious about when you're looking at this from a European perspective, because oftentimes we hear about let's head to the United States or let's head elsewhere, look outside of Europe. When you're looking within Europe, whether it's the European health data space, whether it's eventually the AI Act or some other mandates, regulations coming down the pike, do those set you up for more success? Or are they a hindrance? So in your case, you were just talking about this idea of a harmonized HTA or a single digital health marketplace, a single digital health marketplace that I've heard Louisa and others talk about. That I'm sure is going to be a different perspective, but from your sides, do all of these European regulations, do they help you succeed? Are they really enabling you to grow and scale? Sure, you can take this too anyways.
Yeah, so regarding the complexity of Europe is that the price, the way of the price that you give to for the reimbursement will be for the, I think long years will be kept by the national countries. So that will still be a complexity, but of course, if we achieve a larger market that will be 500 million people, it will be a market that will be larger than the US. And if we can mutualize part of the market access process or the evaluation, it will be a really good incentive for the industry and for the company to invest and start the deployment of this technology in Europe.
I think in general, the more regulation, the worse as a startup, but that as a side note. Overall, I know, and there are working groups in Europe to harmonize all DTx over the country, so I think that would be very good. And I think purely on the reimbursement side, Europe is still very good. Personally, for us at Neuroventis, we're looking into the US already for the last 3 years. Honestly, the more we look into it, the more complex it is. So it's not that I would say US DTx the way to go, especially not. The reason I think personally the US is interesting is that if you start a new company, CE certification with the MDR in Europe is getting very complex for new startups. So that's definitely an argument to go to the US, more as a medical device perspective.
Agree.
They're updating in the US also the regulation regarding the FDA approval and FDA clearance. So I think it will be also challenging in the US in the next few years.
Yeah, but I mean, commercialization in the US is definitely a challenge on its own, and you cannot tackle it without serious funding and a local team and so on. So, if anything, I think the right strategy is just to use really to leverage Europe or grow Europe as a strong market and use that experience to then go to the US, and not the other way around.
No, I just think that one of the critical question is that if we manage to have this big European market, will that be enough to create a sustainable model for our DTx? Because today, well, I think we all share the fact that the pure reimbursement is not enough to survive sustainably. Or are we still waiting for the answer?
I mean, today maybe it's difficult, but there's only 1.5 market. I mean, right now essentially, yeah, a few markets. The half was of France, not for Belgium. Let's say 2.5, let's say.
Careful.
But with the harmonization that they mentioned earlier, I believe that Europe would be a big enough market. Also because we see that the adoption is still early on. In Germany, which is already quite mature, we have 40% of doctors have prescribed. So we're still missing 60%. And when they prescribe, most of them right now have only prescribed once, twice, just to test with their patients before, and they're waiting for feedback, essentially, before feeling comfortable to prescribe more. So, yeah.
But don't you think that commercialization will be a challenge, even if in a bigger market?
It's expensive. That's the thing different between the US and Europe, right? In the US, you can probably have one sales team that is harmonious, like one language, one market. And of course, for Europe, you every time need local resources.
I think as well, in general, I really believe that the future is great for DTx in Europe, and we will have very large DTx companies in Europe in the next years, only selling in Europe for sure, yes.
So we have a question that came in from the audience, and it's, will Pecan also expect a benefit for healthcare systems in terms of cost, and to what extent?
It's part of the criteria that you can demonstrate when you apply. So it's yes, and we are also, and to answer another question, yes, we accept clinical studies that are running outside France, as long as you can demonstrate or explain how it could apply in France. It's okay.
That's really good. Thank you for that. Yeah, in terms of cost, I think that's that's why DTx is so interesting. That in our clinical studies, so we have run, I think, 34 of them by now in the last 10 years. What it shows is that one of our course, let's say an average course of 6 weeks, brings similar efficacy than 1 year of face-to-face psychotherapy, for instance. So in terms of cost, we're talking about 1 to 5, 1 to 10 ratio, which is of course then very advantageous for the system, and also not only because it's cheaper, but because it's much more available, and therefore by treating people ahead without waiting times, you also decrease the overall cost of the system.
Is that a discussion point that you've had a difficult time, though, conveying? So when you're saying we've done studies, we've demonstrated our impact from a clinical or health economic side, when you take that to Belgian authorities or payers or to any other payers, is it a conversation where they're like, okay, we see this, it makes sense, and carry on? Or is it more of a, okay, but, and then that leads you into different discussions?
In our case, I would say that when you look at the pricing of the 53 DGAs, they are all between 180 and 230. So far it feels like, no, it didn't help.
Well, and I know that not all studies are created equal, so we do have to acknowledge that. But when a study's at a quality that you believe is really demonstrating well what your product is doing, I'm curious the receptivity in that regard. And even for you, I'd be curious to see too, when you have studies come and you're evaluating things, is it a different mindset for you of how you're starting to approach things, being on this side of the industry now, or of the ecosystem?
Yeah, for the French evaluation process, let's say the economic part is probably something that we should work on it in terms of recognition in the evaluation process. It's just the way the process is done today is that we are focusing on the value that you bring to the patient. So in terms of medical benefits or quality of life benefits or organizational benefits for the, let's say, healthcare professional plus the patient plus the system, but not not in terms of money that you could avoid to the healthcare system.
I think, okay. So then the other question then to take a pivot before we open it up even more is different business models. So we've been hearing that it sounds like DIGA is very prescription-based. France Pecan will be prescription-based. Are there other business models you are also still looking to achieve, whether it's with private payers? And I'm curious what you've seen too, some of the data that you've been reviewing of, is it even a possibility? Because at least in the United States, you can do I think there's more, there may be more options if you do the employer pathway versus a PBM pathway versus fill in the blank. So there may be more opportunities, which increases the complexity. But so I'm curious if you've been able to experience the opportunity to have more than one business model, or if you even would like to do that.
Yeah, I think Pierre has some great insights on that. Personally, I'm a big believer of combining DTx business models. I think that's something we've been doing in the past as well, that we will continue doing. The one that we currently most pursuing is combination therapies, and so drug plus DTx, or business models that are more pharma-based, so extending life cycles of drugs, things like that. And I'm a big believer of that business model. So that's the one we currently at Neuroventis are mostly pursuing. We tested a little bit employer payments, didn't really work well in Belgium. First signals in France were not very positive as well. And then more contract-based payments in Belgium, it is possible. We have 3 other examples that do that. But at this moment, we decided not to pursue that. But it's on the list, but not on priority one at this moment.
Yeah, similar thoughts. D2C, in my opinion, doesn't work in Europe or in any market that has public healthcare. And even in the US, it's still very hard. If you want to have D2C, you need massive marketing budget to make a name for yourself. Selective contract, so we started like this years ago before DIGA. It works. You can run a business on it, but it's tremendous effort. Contracts takes up to a year to negotiate. They can be changed after a year, as a matter of fact. And then the power of marketing lays in the hands of the health insurances, not in yours. So you lose all control of scale, which is not ideal. And I would agree. Combination is one thing. We are big believers of blended care. Actually since day one, so we really believe that more and more, and also it's an early trend we see right now, and thanks also to France with the telemonitoring law, that it becomes just common sense that the doctors will be empowered to follow their patients when the patient is out of their practice, and that adds a lot of value to everyone.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, because I was indeed very focused on DTx business models. We at Neuroventis, we also truly believe in remote patient monitoring. And so we're actually, most of the projects right now in the pipe are on remote patient monitoring. Because from the beginning, we had a dashboard for the healthcare professional. So we always had the link between the professional and the patients. And so for those type of platforms, we truly believe that remote patient monitoring is the way to go. And then you can go into hybrid clinics, virtual clinics, more to the US. And I think that's a very interesting business model.
And my advice, if you go that way, is that have, let's say, a clear definition of the scope of your different products that are in the full package, because they will be evaluated differently, and you should be able to demonstrate what is the value bring by the DTx part and what is the value bring by the doctor and the, let's say, healthcare professional remote monitoring. And that is a great challenge. But of course, for digital medical devices, we are seeing a lot of combined technology and combined effect, and plus drugs, plus telemonitoring, and so on. So it's thanks to the the effort of the DTx Alliance for categorization and so on, we see that if we try to use this categorization with the available product in the room, probably some of them will be not in one box and not in fully in the second one. So that is a challenge, is to be able to evaluate each part of the product and see where is the main value, where is the main positive healthcare effect that we want to pay as a healthcare system or as a private payer or whatever.
Yeah, and I fully agree, because when we do medical advisory boards on RPM, they always come with DTx X-like components. So it's really then up to us, or in discussion with the authorities, to see, okay, this what we see as RPM, that's more DTx part, because it's always a blended when you ask what the market wants.
I think we have another few minutes. So any other questions, or any questions from the audience, one or two we'll take right here.
Bonjour à tous, Julien Donat, Roche France. Hi everyone. I have a question about the indication you showed. So it was one of your first slides. We see that about 2/3 of the DTx are in either neurology or psychiatry. So my question is, do you think it will remain this way in the future? Does it lie in the essence of DTx, to be more effective in those indications? Or is it because it was the low-hanging fruits of DTx, so it was just a way to kick the business, but in the future we will extend to, all the other indications? Thank you.
I think it will extend. I think for, at least I can speak for what I know, which is not the psychology part. It's more that CBT fits really well to a digital implementation. So I think that's why it's that way. But if you look at DIGA market, the 4 bestsellers are kind of consumer-driven products. So we have obesity, tinnitus, back pain, and insomnia. So not really those. Insomnia, you could argue it's mental health. But so actually the success lies rather in consumer-driven products or symptoms.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing really to add. We'll leave the room for a couple of extra questions.
I was Denise Silber, Basel Strategies. I was interested in Ludovic's comment about pharma. And all of you, have many companies been looking to create pharma alliances to promote DTx? And also, for Germany, if it's 40%, this looks huge from a French standpoint. How did the 40% of physicians prescribing happen to occur?
I can maybe add, and then Germany is more not my cup of tea yet. So I can tell you a little bit. So we did co-promotion deals with pharmaceutical companies, not on prescribed DTx. So we did it on our general digital health. So we decided from commercial reasons to launch our platform free of charge. And so we did co-promotion with one company in 5 countries. So we did co-promotion in Belgium, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and France. And actually that was quite successful, that co-promotion with that one single pharmaceutical company. Actually, that's a whole other topic, do's and don'ts of co-promotion with pharmaceutical companies. I can maybe just share a bit my golden tip personally, is that you have to ensure that you need your KPIs into the KPIs of the people on the field. So you need to be part of the bonus scheme of the people, of the representatives. And then they're really incentivized to speak about your product. But so we had great successes, but also less successes. But that's on the more non-DTx side. I think Pierre has a better view on co-promotion on DTx.
Yeah, so in Germany, I think we reached 40% with two ways mostly. So either you created your own sales force, which makes sense when you have a larger portfolio. Like in our case, we have 6 products that are prescribable, so we have our own sales force. The other way is, of course, in collaboration, and then there is 2 ways to collaborate. You have the pharma partnership. I think many DIGAs have tried it. We also have one, actually, for our chronic pain product. And the other way is these newly created businesses that combine like DIGA alliance, and essentially that combines individual products, individual companies, and go sell them as a package. So outsourcing Salesforce to a third-party company that is not pharmaceutical.
Another question in the back.
Hi, hello, I'm Jacob, CEO of Neuronation. We are DIGA in Germany too. And a question to Pierre. How do you account for the pricing risk? As with the negotiation with the BA firm, you will need to show the price you are getting from all countries in Europe and Western markets and take it into negotiation with the BA firm for permanent listing. If you enter the PCAN program, you obviously will reduce the price. How do you account for this pricing risk?
Sorry, who will reduce the price?
So with
Well, I don't know. I need to talk to him first.
right. So with Hello Better, if you go with a pricing right now of 200 euro plus, and with the PCAN program, to my knowledge, is 150 euro for a 90 days period, more or less. Okay, I understand. All right.
No, clearly, I don't know exactly what will be the price, but PCAN is the derogatory process. So it's 1 year. So it's not, let's say, a final pricing. So that's also part of the answer, maybe.
But do we really expect that the pricing at the end of the PCAN process will be
so
higher?
for at the end of the PCAN process, we don't know what will be the price, but the price will be negotiated with the associated committee for the economic part. Could be higher, could be less. We will see. It depends on the value that will be bring on in the application. It's possible. It's the way it was designed. It's not fixing a maximal price.
I mean, we've seen Germany on both sides of that, where we've seen products start and increase, I believe, and then we've also seen differences too. So I wouldn't want to put it to you to give us the final solution quite yet. But one last question from the audience before I ask all of you to sum up what the future is in your perspective and success measures and all that. Anything else?
One question there.
Are we? Ah. One last.
Hello, Lina Temimi from Vivactis HM3A. I have a question regarding PCAN. How do you assess the organizational benefits? Because I know it's like how do you say it? Like something you assess also not only clinical data but also organizational benefit. How do you assess that?
So I think that will be something that will be discussed in the afternoon. There is a full session dedicated on that. But basically the HAS, which the Haute Autorité de Santé, which is in charge of the evaluation, released the guide 2 years ago about the organizational, the different organizational level that you can prove and you can claim. Sorry.
Okay. But is there any criteria that are like really important for the?
No, it's the criteria will really depend on the solution and the way the device is working. It's really different on something that will apply to obesity for a third of the adult population, or something that will be applied for a really small population of users that with very specific let's say issues, but that can totally change the game for them if you avoid let's say constantly constant visit to the doctor. For some pathology you need to go every week, a few times a week. If you can with the DTx remove that hurdle, then yeah, it could.
I think this afternoon will be the topic of the roundtable about market access and the extension of criteria for DTx, because this is really the topic of organization impact, data-driven medicine impact also will be treated this afternoon.
Very good.
This is a pending question also.
So let's wrap up with one final round of answers before we pause for the pause. With that, I would love to just start us off in terms of, I know that digital therapeutics and all of these technologies will be a part of the future of healthcare. There's no question. But I think from my perspective, it's more a question about the timing and how do we have the payers working with the manufacturers and innovators, and how do we get to patients, and how do we really build this entire ecosystem and infrastructure that we need to do this. We've made a lot of progress in the last 6-10 years, but there's clearly a lot to be done yet. So from my perspective, I know this is going to happen. I know this is it, but it's going to be an interesting path to determine what the next steps will look like. So I'm curious from each of you, do you have any predictions? Do you have any ideas of what you see things starting to unfold in the next coming months? Or if you don't want to answer that, what do you need to be successful to make your work happen in the here and now? So you choose your adventure.
Happy to. I will take the second question. I think that's a bit easier. You guys have a bit more time to think. Maybe three elements. The first one, so key elements. First one is other business models than reimbursement. I think that will be key to be successful. Second one is if you're in a more platform mode, really look at remote patient monitoring and not only look at DTx. And then the third one is harmonizing all DTx and RPM regulations in Europe.
And regarding the PECAN, I think, of course, we have some limits probably, but the way it will evolve, and we need to if we want to change this process, we need to have first application that will go through the process, and then we will update if they have some limits or if things are not working very well. So my advice is first apply with your solution, come through this evaluation process, and we will see if we are below the expectation or if it's reached. For some devices, it will be a success. For some other, there will be maybe a need of a new process, or we will see. But yeah, it's only through experimentation of this pathway that we can go and fix the issues.
Yeah, I think Ludovic summed it up pretty well. Congrats. On top, I would add also, so performance-based pricing will be a big topic, and it's something that we're going towards. And my own personal prediction for the next few months is I think we will see quite a large wave of consolidation in the industry. Yeah.
And I would just close the discussion with one word. I think we will all need a lot of creativity, and not only on procedures and process.
Well, thank you all. I'm really grateful that we were able to have this discussion today. And I think each of the presentations and perspectives you bring really is necessary. We all need to be working together. So I'm really grateful that we had the perspectives from the association side, from the IQVIA data side, from the manufacturer side, from the policymaker side, and a good variety of international perspectives. So thank you all. Thank you, Franck, and thank you, team.
Merci. Vous pouvez l'applaudir pour cette table ronde.
And thank you, Megan.
On se retrouve à 11h après une pause café et networking, à 11h précise. On vous annoncera le retour en salle pour une table ronde sur les usages et adoptions qui va être très importante.